Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Anthony.
Today we're going to do a frequently asked question from our solo ager listeners. How do you make sure you don't leave anything to this family member I don't like or this estranged child even? How do I make sure I don't accidentally leave something to this person? Yeah. So
Yes, we get that question very often.
Oh, yeah. Because many of our solo ager clients, they just want to make sure they don't leave anything to a relative who is either distant or estranged or they just don't like them.
Yeah.
So I want to address a couple of common misconceptions, and then we'll get into the best solution for this particular, wish. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So the first misconception is, can I just omit them from the will? If I just leave them out, doesn't that solve the problem? Kinda.
Sounds simple, but
Yeah. So the assumption underlying that is that assumption underlying that is the real question is, if I omit this person from my will, they have zero involvement, right? They're not going to be, in my probate at all. No, that's not how it works. They will get cited, meaning they will receive notice. And here's how that works. So when you probate a will in court, you are required to notify all the family members who would have inherited under the default inheritance law. That means what would the inheritance plan have been if there was no will? Okay, and that follows a certain sort of next of kin or closest relation pattern. And if one of your technically closest relations is somebody who you wanted to disinherit, they will receive a notice. So if you're a solo ager, you're not unmarried and no children, but you have several nieces and nephews who just don't do a thing for you. They're not around. They don't. They haven't been in your life for decades.
All the time.
Yeah, but they are technically the people who would inherit if you didn't have a will. So if you write a will and you just completely omit them, that might work. But just be aware that those distant or estranged nieces and nephews will receive a court notice. Okay, and that court notice is basically an invitation. Say, would you like to come in and contest the will?
It's throwing up the red flags. Hey, guess what?
Yeah. I mean, it basically is saying, your uncle cut you out of his will, but if you'd like to get back in, come on into court. See what you have to say. Now, this doesn't mean that they necessarily have a legal grounds to overturn your will or that they'll win. I mean, I'm not saying that at all, but you have invited them to the party. Now you have to turn them away. You just created more work. Does that kind of make sense?
More work and more money. It's not exactly cheap to contest a will, and right.
So again, they may not have legitimate grounds. The will may be perfectly valid and well drafted, but you're basically inviting a challenge, at least, right? You may be the quickest draw in the West, but do you want everyone challenging you to a shootout? At all times?
No,
Not better to avoid.
All.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Okay. So let's move on to the next common question or misconception. So can't I just, if I can't just omit them, what if I specifically disinherit them in my will? That kind of works too, but it might not be what you thought it was. Okay. So again, no matter what, these family members, if they're next of kin, they're getting invited to contest your will.
So you're still getting the invitation to the party this way.
Yeah, so the invitation is coming. So traditionally, how do you disinherit them? So there's something called an in terrorem clause. Terrorem clause. I never know how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
And what that means is you're saying that this person does not inherit. But there's two problems with this. And I can't believe that this is not more commonly discussed. But again, you're notifying them. You've named them in the will. So you're, again, inviting the contest. But the way that in terrorem clause works is it says, if let's call him, if nephew contests the will, then he will not receive anything. Do you understand the problem there, Janice?
I do. Yeah, because you don't want him to receive anything anyway.
So what is his disincentive now to contest the will? He has no disincentive because it's either zero or
right.
Try for something at least.
Right. It's a lose-lose for him, so we might as well try.
Yeah. So the way this in terrorem clause work best is to give nephew something as a disincentive. So if your will says, I leave $10,000 to nephew, but if he contests a will, seeking a greater share, then he loses that $10,000. So you've created at least a disincentive for him to challenge, but now you've given $10,000 as sort of, advanced blackmail to a nephew who you otherwise would not have given anything to.
So now you've given money to somebody who may cause a problem later. You didn't want him to give anything to in the first place.
Bingo.
Ooh, yeah.
And every time I explain this to a client, nobody loves this solution.
No, that doesn't sound like it's ideal in any situation. Here's $10,000. I don't like you at all, but just so you don't contest the will. Yeah.
And by the way, it doesn't have to be 10,000. It can be the number that you believe, and every situation different. If you have somebody who's really hard in their luck, maybe $1,000 would be enough. But if you have somebody who's well-to-do, then it might have to be a larger amount because $10,000 might not be enough to dissuade them. So,
right,
you got to figure that out.
Oh, all right. So you've got to tell us what the best solution is here, because both of those sound kind of
Yeah. So for this situation where you want to make sure a specific somebody does not get anything and is not able to come into court and, shake the tree or shake the bushes, as it were, to try to see if they can somehow finagle their way into your estate, the best solution is a trust. So I'm not usually a big rah-rah trust guy. I know a lot of estate planners are always pushing the trust in sort of almost every circumstance. I'm not like that. But in this situation, for this set of circumstances, trust makes a lot of sense. And here's the reason why. The reason a trust works for this need is you will get to avoid probate court. And if you avoid probate court, so a trust is a mechanism of delivering assets to your heirs without the probate court process. That's what I mean by avoiding probate court. And if you don't have the probate court process, then there's no notice to the family members.
So no invitation to the party.
No invitation. No.
I like
would you like
that.
to come and contest? None of that.
Yeah. Would you like to just come into the party, shake the branches of the tree? Nothing. Nothing.
They may never receive any notice at all, let alone an actual formal invitation to come contest the will.
Oh, that sounds so much better, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. And even if the nephew gets wind of what's going on, even if that happens, there's not the same structure in place for him to contest. And what I mean by that is there is a specific statute and a specific procedure for wills on how you contest. It's called you have a 1404 discovery. There's a whole sort of outline of how to do it. It's almost like a roadmap if you want to, hey, come on in. If you want to contest, here's a checklist of how to do it. With trust, it's not as clear cut. It's still definitely doable, but it's again, the path is not as laid out for you as it is with a will as a contestant.
Right. And it seems like it's going to be all on them, right? Because if you're not going through the court, they're going to have to initiate everything.
Correct.
It's going to be a lot harder.
And then last but not least, with a trust, you don't have to do that sort of incentive pre-blackmail payment. You don't have to do any of that. So that's it. I mean, again, I'm not a huge, trust at all costs sort of attorney, but in this circumstance where the goal is to make sure a certain family member does not inherit, and that's totally your prerogative, a trust might make the most sense.
Very good. Thank you for explaining that. This is where sitting down and talking to your estate planner is a really good idea, so you can lay this all out. But I like that, not inviting him to the party. We're going to use that again. So there should be a link in the comments, the bio down at the bottom, for a copy of Anthony's Solo Ager book, the Solo Ager Estate Plan. So fill out that and you'll get a free e-copy of Anthony's book. That will definitely dig into this a little bit deeper.
Yeah, this actually makes a lot of sense for solo agers in particular. It seems the notion of making sure this distant relative does not receive seems to be fairly common with my solo ager clients, so I want to make sure you're aware of how to do that properly.
We do hear this often.
Okay. Thank you, Janice, as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hope this was helpful, and we will talk again next time. Bye now.
Talk soon.